Thank you, Abir. As we have all been going through the last 12 days, it's a very, very difficult time for all of us, especially for you and Malasri Mkwala. And I would like to remember your Baba Prabal, not just as a world renowned linguist, an Esperanto scholar, an activist who, as part of the administration, helped shape humane policies at the University of Hyderabad, but personally, as a friend, as a mentor, and as a conscience keeper. I'm really going to miss that because he suddenly calls out of the blue and responds to something that I had written or said and puts everything in perspective. I want to start backwards in one sense because I did not get a chance to really thank him, or maybe I did. Last year, when he was giving the New Year greetings around 2025, he asked rather sharply and out of the blue, Aparna, this is your father's centenary year. What are you doing for it? I'm sure you have something big planned. And Molasri and her brother had done something for their father. And I will put up a Facebook post, which I'm writing about my father. And as you know, our fathers were both born in 1925. That was Prabal. He put everything in perspective, dates, So we did have a nice centenary celebration, and I did tell him about it. And I was telling my sister, we must plan something, and just, I feel he was the trigger for many of these things. He was also there asking and following about the poetry prize that we have started on my father's name. And it's been 17 years. And I said, I hope to get you to Hyderabad at some point on the pretext of the poetry prize. And he said, yes, yes, that will be an opportunity. Because, I know that Prabal likes to read, likes to, write what all of us can read in hours. He could read in minutes. He could process. He could do things. He and I were involved starting the Study in India program. And there he would suddenly put something in perspective. 2001, 9/11, he was director of the program. We had students here from the US and, young kids suddenly not able to process what happened, the disappearance of the World Trade Center. He quietly came and sat down and told them, I went to NYU in the 1970s. There was no World Trade Center then, and there is none now. They were shocked. Some of them found that, how can he just say that? Some of them said, it put it in perspective for us. So that was Prabal, always putting things in perspective, making us understand, exactly what was happening. And he always knew what to say at the right time. And I read a little bit of this at the condolence meeting at the School of Humanities, where he was dean last week. But not all of you were here. So I'm going to read this because it really is in Prabal's words. I've taken, Leela Prasad's consent for me to read this out. This is Prabal's note to Leela when Professor Nagarajan, her father, passed away. So I'm reading from Prabal's note in 2014. The loss of Professor Nagarajan impacts me personally, as I regarded him as a senior friend, not just as a colleague. I first attended a lecture by Professor Nagarajan at Ferguson College, Pune, sometime in the 1980s. But I had heard from him from my mentor Ashok Kelkar and his friends Sujit and Meenakshi Mukherjee in the 1970s. It was impossible not to know that he was a legend. Imagine my surprise then to finding in 1991 at the University of Hyderabad, where I had joined in 1989. He joined as professor at the age of 36, as most of you know, but it was really commendable. And he was invited by Professor Krishnamurthy, the Vice Chancellor at that time, to take on that position so that they could build a world-class center for the study of applied linguistics and translation studies. Anyway, that was me. I go back to Prabal. So I have to work with him in setting up a center for comparative literature, even to the extent of working out a detailed syllabus. He was perfectly aware that this was not a field in which I had acquired expertise, but he seemed confident that I would be able to do the reading and acquire it forthwith. His enthusiasm and confidence were infectious qualities, and he proved to be a working partner, willing and able to put me at ease across the abyss separating his generation and mine. When I said becoming a professor at my age makes me feel like a misfit in all these committees, he took a sympathetic view and said, it is possible to acquire the reputation of being a bad committee man. And if you manage to do that, then people will stop asking you to get into committees. Prabal always liked to talk of himself as a bad committee man. I don't think he was, but he thought so. Well, the University of Hyderabad was a teenager by 1989. It was not yet an adult, and it was a privilege to work with Professor Nagarajan to help bring the university into the adulthood it is now justly proud of. He was redoubtable institution builder. And I would say the same about Prabal, that he was an institution builder, and every stone he touched was, generally deeply impacted by his intellect, his wit, his humor, and, his humanness. I think students mattered to Prabal more than anything else. So institution building meant that he was a student-friendly person, someone who wanted to see them through, and he took pride in their achievements at a later point in time. And he never forgot anybody, never forgot what they worked on, and always remembered to praise people for things that they probably never saw within themselves. Anyway, I don't think it's really easy for us to process all this. And I thank you, Abir, for giving us this opportunity, and wish you the strength to bear with this loss too soon. If he had lived to be 100, he would have been as sharp as ever. Take care. Thank you.